Greetings, ladies and metalheads, and welcome to the latest edition of Read Team Fuss, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. Just as a quick side note, I do stream 6 days a week on this channel at 9 AM GMT+1. If you're interested in that sort of thing, I would love to see you there. More importantly, let's head on to the story. There Were No Stars, written for GodFromMachine. Our universe was a dying one. We knew that since we first gazed upon the night sky and saw the howling nothing stare back at us. Yet we survived in the festering carcass of a cosmos for thousands of years with nothing but our own flickering sun looking down on us, fueling our lives, our hopes. Years passed. We formed kingdoms and tore them down, forged empires, and saw them crumble to dust, built monuments to gods, only to forget they ever even existed. We lived, we loved, we hated. We maimed and killed each other with fang and claw, with rocks, spears, guns, and cannons. We rained death upon our brethren, split the atom, and used it to scorch entire cities into ashes. Yet at the same time, we were sowing the soil beneath our feet with corpses. We were also crafting wonderful machines that let us peer in the abyss that hung above our heads after every sunset. Machines that allowed us to perform complex calculations and gain insight to the world around us. We built machines that conquered the skies and the seas for us. Machines that gave us freedom, true freedom. The freedom to leave our ball of rock and dirt behind and sail the fathomless void. We were free from our planet's gravity. Space was ours to conquer, but time was not. In fact, our time was running out. It was a slow process, but a steady one. We didn't notice for decades, and it took us even longer to connect the dots. But finally, we figured it out. The winters becoming harsher, the summers becoming bleaker, the seasons blending to a uniform grey. The star that was fueling our lives, the hearth around which we had built our home, was running out of fuel on its own. Our scientists established patterns, drew models, and came to conclusions. The death of our sun was coming. It wasn't imminent. There would still be an entire generations that would be born, grow old, and die before darkness overtook our ball of rock and dirt. But it was coming. Inmates on death row. That's what we were, and the execution chamber was inching closer by the day. Eventually, we built stations in our orbit. We sent probes into the abyss and settled all the way to the fringes of our solar system. Little more than research bases at first. That in time turned to research facilities, then research complexes, and so on until we had proper colonies littering our little corner of the void. We were unshackled by our homeworld's gravity, but were still confined within our system, and the clock was still ticking to the day of our extinction at the hands of entropy. Until one of our observers saw it, twinkling like a flame of a candle, another star. In the vast black of the cosmic ocean, we were floating upon a lighthouse. News traveled as fast as light could carry them. We saw a future, not just for us, but for generations to come, for our species, for life itself. Every settled planet, asteroid, and orbital station cheered and celebrated at this new information. We named it Hope's Candle, and trained our every probe on it. The smartest amongst us worked tirelessly to pinpoint its location and figure out how to get us there. Like castaways, seeing the land for the first time in years, we were determined to get to it, no matter what. We didn't even bother to consider if its orbit was in any way habitable, if its radiation could sustain us, or if it would simply kill us when we approached its vicinity. We didn't even ask ourselves why its light had only now graced us, even though we had been staring at its direction for millennia. The awakening was a rude one. Our new star, Hope's Candle, was not a star at all. It was a celestial ghost, a swan song of a long-dead sun. The only reason why we could now see it was because of its death throes. It exploded with enough force to make itself visible from halfway across the galaxy. We weren't devastated, however. We were filled with more determination than ever. Now we know there are other stars out there, in the void. Even if the one we saw was a dead one, there were bound to be younger ones still pulsating with warmth and promise of life. There had to be. Necessity drove our inventions. A sheer refusal to accept our end and meekly breathe our last on a frozen world drove our collective will. We geared all of our industrial production towards void travel. We strip-mined entire planets to build massive exploration fleets, pushed thermodynamics to their limits to propel them, volunteered en masse to man them, and then we had a breakthrough. Some compared it to the discovery of fire. Most knew as far, far more important. Egress points, gravitational anomalies near the edges of solar systems, where space and time collapsed in on themselves and formed passages to other solar systems. Some had completely degraded, as there was no longer a star to exert gravitational forces on the other side and sustain the passage. Most were still intact enough for a ship to pass through them, but led to more of the void that we were drowning in. Rarely, they led to astral graveyards, planets that still orbited the remnants of their deceased star, that more often than not had now taken the form of a black hole or a dwarf version of its former self, incapable of sustaining any form of life. Those astral graveyards were what we were after. We had become a civilization of cosmic tomb raiders, sifting along the ashes, hoping to find something, anything, that could help us keep the lights on for just a little longer. Countless fleets were sent to the void, hunting for a star with still beating heart, hunting for life. They never found that. What they found was an echo. Orbiting a tiny, pale star, barely bright enough to be noticeable, was a sphere of cold rock and ice. It wouldn't have caught the attention of the explorers were it not for its peculiar geological formations. Visible to our scans beneath the layer of ice covering them, we stepped onto that dead world, dancing around its corpse of a star. The formations were not geological in nature, but rather artificial instead, albeit the techniques used to construct them were beyond anything our engineers could imagine, let alone comprehend and replicate. It was, in fact, immensely difficult to even reconcile with their existence, so utterly alien they were to us. It took several expeditions to fully explore the structures, as the mental attrition was more than what a single exploration crew could take. The humming of ancient machinery maintaining an atmosphere of oxygen, nitrogen, argon, and carbon dioxide accompanied our explorers, though the sheer age of the labyrinthian construct they were delving into made it impossible for any technology known to us to still be operable. The structure was immense, resembling a city in size. That, combined with the condition of the planet, meant that any effort to fully explore it would take years or even decades. Though our government attempted to keep its existence hidden at first, soon word of the incomprehensible structure discovered on a far-away frozen planet got out. Speculation surged as to its nature. A temple, a research complex, a military installation, all equally valid in their own right, all equally wrong as well. Those of us who worked personally in its otherworldly guts quickly came to accept that its purpose was beyond what we could understand, and to simply scrape whatever knowledge we could from it was all we had any right to hope for. We did find scraps of knowledge, holographic images depicting creatures with only 4 limbs, soft tissue covering their skeleton, and what can be described as their version of a head filled with sensory organs. One of those sensory organs, their eyes, caught my interest in particular. Even in the decayed holograms, there was something about them, a sensation of dread when gazing upon them, coupled with tremendous difficulty to look away. They were similar to the black holes, the wounds upon the face of the universe in that way. We also found depictions of their own void-faring vessels, their designs as maddeningly impossible as that of the building that we were exploring. We saw holograms showcasing entire fleets of them, annihilating continents, worlds, even stars in mere moments. They too were using the egress points we were, and their charts of routes on them engulfed the entire galaxy, and even led beyond it. It is pointless to try and fathom the extent of their dominion, so vast that it was. It was clear that these beings were powerful beyond belief, and that was what drove us to send crew after crew to that dead planet, orbiting the corpse of a star. It was what convinced me to volunteer, even though I knew other expeditions were driven to madness and even suicide as they explored that tomb. If these beings held the knowledge and the power to rule the universe, then maybe they also held the knowledge and power to save it. Maybe we could glimpse upon it and breathe life into our cosmos. Deeper into the structure, we saw foreign writing that didn't belong to those that had created that place, painted along the walls, the ceilings, the floors. It was the same message written in what must have been every language ever spoken in the galaxy. That was how we were able to translate it. Let the sleeping gods lie. Let the Terran domain wither and die. In the deepest of deeps, beyond the edges of time, this is the end of all punishment for their crime. The writing got denser the further we went, overlaying on itself, writing horizontally, vertically, diagonally on each and every available surface. We recognized it as a warning. Spent months deliberating on whether we should proceed. Unnerved by the message and mentally fatigued merely by being in its structure, several members of the expedition, myself included, pleaded to simply seal the place and forget about its existence. It wasn't up to us, however. The admiral of the exploration fleet had found this planet, and the de facto supreme commander of any expeditions taking place on it decided to push on. When facing the disappearance of your entire race, no risk is too high, after all. 3 entire floors of the structure were covered by the text, until it abruptly stopped, and the walls, the ceiling, the floor were clean again. While we had to use our own sources of light to explore the structure before, the sector was still lit, and its PA system was still operational. In our own language, in a voice that seemed familiar to each and every member of the crew, it called to us by name, to walk down the corridor and to open the gate that stood at its end. Almost entranced by it, we obliged, and beyond, we saw a prism, a tear in the fabric of reality, or perhaps a mirror. Looking back at us, we saw our own forms. We didn't speak, and neither did our reflections. We just stood as light flickered at the edges of our vision. It wasn't the electricity in the room going on and off. It was light itself, phasing in and out of existence. Gravity seemed to pull more heavily on our bodies, and our heads rang when a high-pitched noise filled the room. The floor beneath us collapsed into an endless abyss, and the ceiling above climbed beyond our sight. Darkness overtook us. When I woke up months later, construction of the awakening arrays had already begun. I knew every technical detail of how to build one. Their blueprints were implanted within my mind the day we found the prism, and I had been constantly describing them while unconscious ever since. But I didn't really know how they worked. My surface-level understanding of them was that they siphoned material from another place, another universe maybe, or from beyond the event horizon of black holes, and concentrating them on a single point until they coalesced into a star or reignited a dying one. It would be almost another century before the first set of stars was reignited, practically no time at all in the cosmic scale. Even our own sun was given an extension of life by the arrays. Some questioned the decision to use this technology. I myself protested it. We were largely ignored, and the devices were built. Now, however, a peculiar phenomenon is being observed at some of the systems whose stars we brought back to life. Strange shapes, almost resembling void ships, albeit impossible in their design, are being seen, rising from frozen worlds before the observation stations that reported them go dark. There were no stars when I looked to the night sky as a child. I used to worry that we were alone. Now, like matches being struck alight, more and more of them are dotting the world above me. I worry that we are not. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.